I think for the moment markets are quite dislocated from world events actually. I mean what we're seeing is a sort of massacre of the bears really. A lot of the things which worked very well last year and what happens is investors kind of get with the program have worked extremely badly, to put it mildly, this year. But I do think it's very important what's happened in Germany, and it's part of this overall trend against establishment parties. We obviously see it most conspicuously in France with the continuing popularity of Marine Le Pen, and the Front National will be gain ever more support from this migrant crisis. So I do think we're prospectively looking forward to a situation where that Franco-German axis, which has been that kind of, you know, the main backbone of the modern Europe as we know it, is going to be looking very different in the next few months and years.
Is it just because there's a short-term perspective on markets? I mean, States, we've got a big election coming up too, and you haven't seen any discounting in the S&P 500 so far. So is it just as we get much closer and it's more of a couple of weeks out, a few weeks out, that you start to see this discounting mechanism into stock markets?
I think it's a bit of that. I think it's a bit of, you know, where your starting point was. I mean, you know, it's only a matter of a few weeks ago that we sort of had commodity price indices at multi-decade lows. Like Bloomberg Commodity Index was back to where it was, you know, in the late 1980s. So we'd had tremendously ferocious bear markets in a lot of these things. And there's not many things you can say for certain, but one is that markets never go in straight lines. I mean, take a you know, a once mega cap stock like Anglo American. I mean, that stock had fallen, I don't know, 90% from its peak of a couple of years ago, and has subsequently, you know, more than doubled, nearly tripled from its lows.
So as forward-looking indicators...
So it depends on where your perspective is.
So as a forward-looking indicator, is the market... Was it more realistic when we were at those multi-decade lows you mentioned, or was it more realistic now? Because it seems to me we've done a lot on credit now with the market having rallied off all those concerns that were there. I think we all understood them. The slowdown in China, the concern about the growth in the US, with Janet Yellen having taken off, we think at least one hike off the table as well. Concern about Europe, concern about emerging markets. All those are still there, but we've had this enormous rally, relief rally, called massacre of the bears, as you put it as well. So was the market more credible then, or now in its forward-looking indicator ability?
I think the market was more credible then,
right?
Actually, where I think the market did have it wrong, and I think we talked about this previously, I think the idea that this was a recapitulation of 2008 and we were looking at a 2008 type banking crisis where banks had a liquidity problem and so on, I think that was very sort of sloppy thinking. That was lazy thinking, you know, that you know, you go back to the experience which is most recent in your mind. That never seemed at all plausible to me. Yes, of course, a situation where bank shareholders lose their assets, or, you know, the lower bits of bank bonds are give investors big losses. That's completely understandable in a new regime.
We had a game changer though last week. We had Mario Draghi out there encouraging banks to lend and underwriting the system yet again. So there was a game changer from all the you know, four elements that Steve's just brought up. The game changer has been Mario Draghi saying, I'm going to stimulate the system, I'm going to support equities, going to support the banks.
Well, I agree with that up to a point. And where I think I would differ from you on that is that Draghi obviously was going to try and do more than was expected in some way or another, having it been a disappointment on the other side. But it is, of course, more than expected in a set of policy measures which haven't really been very successful in supporting European growth. You know, we're still sort of wading through treacle in Europe in spite of all that it takes and so on. So he has done more, but he has done more of the same.